Childhood is an exciting yet confusing time, and books and media can be a great help during those moments of identity crisis and exploration. Gabriel Goldstone's historical fiction, Waltrout, dives into the challenges of identity and culture, offering a captivating read for those navigating these experiences. Let's get into it.
My name's Gabriel Goldstone. I go by the name Gabe, and I'm really delighted to be able to share a bit with you here on this program. I've been trying to explore my heritage throughout my life, and it's always been a mystery to me. And previously to this book that we're going to talk about, I had written a few books about my parents, but now this book is about my growing up years in Winnipeg in the 1960s. And the 1960s are now considered an historical era. So this is historical fiction. We're talking about my childhood.
I think that's so funny sometimes because, like, when you think of historical, you think of way, way back 100+ years ago. But time moves on. It doesn't wait for any of us.
Yes. So this is called old age. My youth is called historical. Yes.
What got you into writing? And of course, I love to get more into this book, Waltrout. But as an author, what kind of sparked that interest?
Well, I think as a kid, I was heavy into reading because I was a shy and awkward kid, coming from an immigrant family. I didn't fit in, so I escaped into books. I was addicted to Nancy Drew, and she had a lot of books to read. That's how I looked for my reflection in books, and I couldn't find it when I was growing up, so that's why I was reading Nancy Drew, because they didn't have any books about immigrants like my family. And then when I got older, I studied literature because I always thought books were the key to understanding ourselves. That was just my go-to. And now I've finally been able to, because I couldn't find the books I wanted to read, I had to write my own books.
Yeah, I've heard that from a number of authors. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she has Filipino heritage, and she was writing Filipino books that explore like newcomer or, culturally diverse youth, stories that she wanted to have as a kid, creating that for her own kids so that they can have a better understanding of their experience and have something to relate to.
Exactly. Like, you look to books like a mirror almost. You want to kind of like figure out your life. And so you turn to books where you can quietly, unobtrusively figure out where the world is at, where your world is at.
Yeah, like representation is so important. And when we're looking at all forms of media, there are areas where it has definitely greatly improved. In other areas where we still need to work on. I'm a big fan of animation and seeing the diversity of characters. For example, Craig of the Creek, exploring a Black American youth and his experiences growing up in the town. And that's something, it's the same thing with The Proud Family, another show that explores Black and Latino characters and their stories.
Yeah, I feel like being able to read other people's stories that are like you validates your own stories. It makes you become more confident in who you are. And young kids especially are vulnerable. They want to feel like they fit in, and they can only feel if they fit in is if they think that others would understand them.
Definitely. So your book, Waltrout, a historic fictional story based on your own personal experiences. Walk me through, give me a quick synopsis of this book for our listeners.
Okay, sure. I'll try. Waltrout rhymes with kraut. So Waltrout is a kraut. Waltrout feels uncomfortable in her English language school Monday to Friday because she is seen as different. She lives in two worlds. During the weekday, it's that school world where she feels bullied. But on the weekend, she has another world when that is centered around her church, because in the 60s, when the immigrants after the war came from Eastern Europe, and which is part of what my family history is, they centered their community life around the immigrant churches. And so Waltraud on Saturdays goes to German school, where she continues to learn the German language and read German books. And then she has the church school on Sunday school and the church community on Sundays. So, and she has friends, and this is what she wants. She wants to feel included. So as a 10, 11-year-old girl, she needs friends, and she doesn't have those in her Canadian schools, but she does have them on the weekend. So she has two worlds. And she uses books as her coping mechanism during the week. And then as the book goes on, the family decides to move into a quote-unquote show home in a new development. In the 60s, Winnipeg was just burgeoning on the population. So she figures when they move into this new suburb, she's going to totally reinvent herself, because there's like, they go to a show home that's furnished with like a princess bed. She's going to be a princess, and she's going to have this new life, and nobody's going to know about her immigrant parents, because she's got this idea that she's going to change her name. And by changing her name, she's going to change her identity. So that's what the story explores.
I mean, for a lot of people, like, they can relate, like how many people who move from Asian countries end up changing their names to something that's more anglicized, so people don't struggle with it. And then there's that challenge of balancing cultural identity, a place where you're from or connected to, and this new home, and trying to find a balance in that.
There was even one teacher who suggested that she changed her name. And again, that was where Waltraud gets the idea that, yeah, I could change my name. But what that does is that really kind of underlines the basic insecurity about being who you are. And so what I try to do in the book, in the end, I don't want to give away too much, but I want to show that this character actually is able to handle who she is and not feel ashamed of who she is, because that's a lot of that stigma turns into shame, and that shame can be very self-destructive. And through Nancy Drew, this is what I want to try to encourage.
Tying it together now.
Yes, through Nancy Drew, I want young readers to understand it. Nancy Drew showed through her mystery solving, her three things were to be kind, to be curious, and to be brave. And these are the things that Waltraud learns throughout the course of the book. And it's a message I want to give to the young readers: to be kind, to be brave, and to be curious. And I don't know, I think those are good rules for, even though Nancy Drew wasn't considered highbrow literature, I think the message is still relevant today.
Well, yeah, of course, when we're looking at, the experiences kids go through at school, especially like, look at COVID-19, like a lot of isolation, trying to find out who you are. And in those situations, what can you really do? And like, it's already, I remember my high school experiences trying to find out who you are. Now throw that into, like, I didn't really have social media too much yet. Like, it was just kind of growing, like Facebook and things, but Instagram wasn't too big yet. Twitter wasn't too big, but add that in, like the things that kids must go through nowadays, like it is definitely a challenge.
And I think that kids now more than ever compare their insides to other people's outsides. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this comes across hopefully in people reading my book, but I think that books can be the way to understand that other people's insides might not be as cool as their outsides.
Like, it's important learning to love yourself. And yeah, everyone has an awkward stage. I had an awkward stage, play times where I tried this, or I'm actually this kind of person. But you know what? I think that's the benefits of childhood, is the opportunity to explore, to go on that journey. And in Waltraud, she's going through that time of like, oh, do I change who I am? But learning, hey, there's elements that I love, trying to find out who she is. And I guess in the end, she's a completely different person at the end, but like a positive amalgamation of all these other ideas that she was having.
Right. She does go through various struggles. And it's also that coming of age time when you're insecure about the changes your body is going through. And that's part of the story as well.
So when you're writing a book, how do you approach it? Because, for some people, when they hear like, oh, yes, I'm going to be writing a book, they can be a little bit intimidated by the whole process. And I've heard like different techniques and ways that authors approach it, but I'd love to hear, what is your approach or mindset when you're working on a piece of literature?
Okay, well, first of all, I mean, I'm retired now, but even when I was working, I try to write every day. Like before I would go to work in the morning, while I was eating my porridge, I would be writing a little bit. Even if it was just teeny tiny steps, I would feel like I was making progress. And so I've always had to kind of have some project on the go and make a little step on that project every day. And this is the first book that I wrote that I didn't have to do a ton of research, because the main research
it's based on your life, right?
Right. So the main research I did was reread some Nancy Drew books, which was a lot of fun. I found a secondhand store that was going out of business in the city, and I bought up a bunch of books. So I did reread some Nancy Drew books. But earlier I had the great excuse to do some traveling. So I did a lot of research and traveling. But research can become a way to procrastinate. So I just, sometimes I don't know where a story's going, but I just keep writing. And then once you got that first draft out there, then you can shape it into something.
It's like almost molding clay, right?
Yes.
Like you just kind of, you're working on it, and eventually get something. You're like, okay, now we can refine it. Now we can define what it's going to become.
And sometimes you have to totally change the point of view or whatever, but it's easier than dealing with a blank page.
Yeah, definitely. Here's a question for you. This is a little off topic, but, what are your thoughts on, as, we're living in the age of AI, a lot of people are utilizing AI for creative writing. There's a ton of books that you can find that are completely AI generated, and people being like, yes, I created it. I guess just what are your thoughts on having this sort of a technology out there?
Right. I went to a genealogy workshop over the course of the summer where they were really praising AI, and I can see the benefits for genealogy. And I have a couple of writer friends who are totally in love with it as well. And maybe this is just me being old, but for me, it's the process that is all of that matters. Like, I don't want a perfect novel. I want to go on the journey of writing the novel. So AI kind of leaves me cold.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I can see some benefits in it, in terms of like, hey, give me some idea prompts or things. But you definitely, especially for kids working on projects, I think it robs them of the experience of learning through trial and error, of being like, hey, what is my voice? Because I've done some testing, like I'll write my own article and I'm like, okay, let's put this in AI and see, like, rewrite this, refine this a little bit. And then when I read it through another time, I'm like, wow, it completely took out my voice in how I write, or how my sort of gimmicks and aura in my writing is.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I kind of look at creativity as like dynamic, and it's something that you cannot totally control the process. And AI has this idea of perfect, quote unquote, and it's like growing a tree. I mean, most interesting trees have a lot of character in them. Like, and the gardener might have said like, that won't work, but I mean, that tree became what it is, interesting because it followed through on all these little light. It had to follow the light in different ways, and it became a kind of crooked tree. Do we want perfect trees? Do we want perfect projects? I think
it's very sterilized.
Yeah.
And like watching it, AI generated movies, it loses a lot of the direction and form. It doesn't have, I find, an idea of what it wants to be. It's just kind of an amalgamation of everything that's going to be, that it's been fed. And it becomes, in my opinion, it becomes a nothing burger. Like, it goes from, all these interesting ideas and concepts, and when you mush them together without having any, uniqueness, originality, it just becomes kind of generic.
I mean, I can see its uses. For example, like in genealogy, you can read this old-fashioned handwriting that nobody could decipher. I mean, things like that as a tool, but not as an end in itself.
Yeah, one thing that I've been doing, I play Dungeons and Dragons, and one thing I find is it eats up a lot of time preparing for a session. So I have been utilizing ChatGPT to help me in that process to try and speed it up, because it's a hobby. I don't want to invest too much time into it. Like, my life is busy enough. I don't need to spend hours every day preparing for a game that lasts 2 hours sort of thing. I don't want to spend 8 hours for every 2 hours of play.
Okay, yeah.
So I have found it does help me. I'm like, here's some ideas, blah, 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 let's like just a jumble of things. Format this for me. And it kind of crafts it a little bit easier. And then from there, I'm like, oh, great. Now I have prompts and I've saved myself hours of prep time. So in that case, it's helped me a lot. Now, if I wanted to create a D&D adventure and then publish it for people to explore, I wouldn't necessarily use that. I'd want to put a little bit more personality into it.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. So you're saying using it as a tool.
Yeah, to just be like,
not as an end.
Hey, here's my ideas. Like, I'll write out a scenario, like not even trying to be too grammatically correct. Just like, let's get as many ideas out as possible for this situation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, here's just a mess of words and ideas. Throw it in, and it makes it into a much more cohesive paragraph for me to be like, oh, now I can read through that. And of course, like D&D, you're role-playing anyway. So whatever you write, you're barely even following it. But I find it has been helpful in that aspect. And I can see in terms of like AI art, throwing some ideas out there and be like, I can't quite figure out what I want to do. A samurai, pirate, something. Oh, that's interesting. Now I can work off of that.
Yeah, no, I mean, making mistakes or following red herrings that lead you nowhere can be really frustrating. But I just think, that's part of life.
Part of the journey. If anything is too easy, you don't necessarily learn from it.
Well, and you don't have the satisfaction. Like if you go on a really hard journey, sure, you can take the airplane to get to wherever. But if whatever you're doing takes a lot of slow plodding and detours and stuff, I think wherever you're going, you're going to appreciate it so much more.
If I'm remembering correctly and reading here correctly, the book Waltraud is now out, right?
Yes, it came out. Yesterday was its official release day.
Oh, September 3rd, official release. I guess what sort of reaction are you getting from people? What have people been saying or feeling?
I've been super surprised and grateful for the positive endorsements I've been receiving. Like it's awesome. I'm very excited about that. And I'm having a book launch.
Ooh, very exciting. You doing
Yes.
any like book readings or things like that in the future?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I'm hoping to share this with children in their classrooms.
Oh, nice.
And my book launch on Saturday was with another author, children's author. So I'm hoping we'll have a good conversation there.
Is there a reason why you wanted to focus on kind of youth and young adults kind of literature, children's literature?
I suppose I've seen that age group is where I've had some of my own personal biggest moments of decision making. And I've always gravitated to, I like kids. I've had 3 of my own kids, and I find middle grade to be an age that is open-minded and yet still listening to support. And they're also big readers, like way bigger readers than as they get into being older teenagers. And then the next big group, I guess, would be older women, because a lot of throughout middle age, a lot of people don't have time to read. Reading is time consuming. But kids are reading for they're not just reading for entertainment. They're reading to
learn, to find experiences, to go on journeys, because that's what I would do, reading books like fantasy, Dinotopia, these adventures bigger than life where characters find themselves. And I think as kids where, you're trying to figure out who you are, seeing someone else's journey can help in your own.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I haven't written an adult novel, but I love reading adult novels, but I just feel like my voice is a middle grade voice.
Fair. What's kind of next? Do you have any other ideas or stories that you would like to tackle or approach?
Well, I've been finishing up a middle grade novel set in the Interlake. And kind of inspired by camping I did with my young family. And there's, I don't know if you know where Camp Morton is. It's just north of Gimli. It's probably the only set of ruins around here. And there used to be children's camps there. So I feel like there's ghosts talking to me.
Ooh, that's fun. Yeah, like I think most people can kind of have that connection of like going on those summer vacations, those summer adventures as a kid out in the woods, in nature, just experiencing the world.
Right. And you know, those campfires and those moon rises and sunsets are inspiring for ghost stories. Yeah.
Of course. So if someone's interested in learning a little bit about Waltraud or reading the book in itself, where can they go?
I have a website, GabrielGoldstone.com, where I try to post weekly about research behind my stories, and you can see links there to my other stories, which are set in Europe. I also have a discussion guide on my publisher's website, Heritage House, and they've been really a wonderful publisher to work with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking this time to chat with me about literature and your book. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. And if anybody's interested, the launch is September 7th at McNally Robinson at 7.
Have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.